All right, so here's the deal. I know you watched Shakespeare in Love and you got a little bit of a sense of how the Shakespearean theater, what it was all about. As much as you guys might have a little bit of reservation and feel like this is like super highbrow stuff and hard to understand, in Shakespeare's time, it was pretty much like the strip clubs in Vegas. Like it was considered super scandalous to be involved in this in any way. They were shut down all the time.
In a play?
Huh?
Being a play?
The play, yes, the actors in the plays were, this was not really considered highbrow entertainment. And they were plagued with scandals all the time. Women on stage, they shut down for that because that was scandalous. So it's not as, I mean, it is highbrow in the sense that we respect it, but at the time it was very much appealing to the common person. Yeah.
When movie was it like the Queen?
Yeah, the Queen did like it and it elevated a little bit. And then when she died and James I took over, he actually commissioned Shakespeare to be his personal like playwright. So that's when he wrote all his plays. So it's not that people didn't necessarily enjoy it, but she was a great supporter of the arts. She stood out in time over history compared to a lot of rulers. They were shut down often because of the plague. There would be just kind of like, we got a huge COVID outbreak, we're shutting everything down. That happened a lot in the theater, and so they were just out of work for a while. They closed down completely during the season of Lent because it was way too scandalous to do something like formal play during the holy season of Lent. So it was very much a, you know, touch and go kind of activity. Yeah.
So did the men just play the women?
Yes. Yes. So a girl like Juliet, probably like Juliet, would have been played by a boy whose voice hadn't broken yet. So you kind of missed that part of the movie because his voice broke on the day of the performance. So they were stuck. They had to switch him out. So when you think about that, you've got young boys whose voice hasn't changed yet. These are not exactly like super prominent or wealthy type families that would allow their child to be involved in this kind of an activity, right? So they were probably runaways or very downtrodden kind of people that were attracted to this lifestyle. Shakespeare's, his wife had money. He married into money. Yeah. All right, we ready to start? I'll stop us really often. It'll get to be annoying at first, but I get the hang of it. Just to make sure everybody knows what's going on. One thing to just kind of clarify before we start, you can see how it's all jagged on the edges, on the ends of the lines, right? Doesn't look like it's just a novel, the way that the lines are written. See how it's all choppy on the end? It's because Shakespeare wrote the whole thing in, or most of it, in iambic pentameter, which means that it's a 10-beat line. So it's ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Then you go to the next one. So the convention at the time for poetry was that every new line of poetry started with a capital letter. So that's why everything looks like it's a capital letter on the left-hand side when it's the choppy lines. And it's not necessarily always the start of a new sentence. So just try to kind of ignore the capitals and realize that's just a poetry convention, and just pay attention to the periods to know how to pronounce things. The other thing is, if you look at what's line 10, see the word bestowed with an apostrophe in it? The apostrophe is there because Shakespeare, at the time, that word would have been pronounced bestow ed. They would have pronounced the ed part on the end. They would have slid it together. But for Shakespeare, because he didn't want to give up an actual syllable for the ed part, he put the apostrophe in to show it was just bestowed, so that you wouldn't have to give up that extra beat. So when you think about the lyrics of your songs, they slide things together all the time to make it fit the rhythm of the music. So that's what Shakespeare is doing. He really is responsible for seriously changing our language in a lot of ways, like dropping that ed on the end of a verb like that. Okay. One last thing. If you see the brackets around Don Pedro at the very beginning, the squared off brackets, not the rounded ones, but the square ones. That means that they're not really 100% sure what that word is supposed to be. from the original manuscript that was smudgy or somebody dropped ketchup on it or something. They don't know 100%, but that's the best educated guess of what would go in there. And I think probably they're like 99.9% right with what they guessed to put in there based on the context of everything else that's happening in the play. But Shakespeare didn't live to see his plays published. So he would write a script like we saw, and they were literally like, you know, passing it out to the actor to hand around and to learn the lines. And sometimes before he even finished the entire play, they're learning the lines of it. So the script itself was just a means for them to be able to put on a play. It wasn't considered a work of art on its own that somebody would necessarily pick up and read for pleasure. They're definitely meant to be performed, not meant to be read, which is why we'll watch it as well, because it's really like fully appreciated. You should see it, not just read it. But the point is, there wasn't any super clean manuscript copy that went to print. This is somebody sitting in the audience writing down the words of the play as it unfolded so that they could have a record of it. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's in brackets like that. If they're rounded, it's just stylistic, like what we would use for commas. Okay, all right, are we ready to start? Everybody? Here we go, Leonato. We are in Messina at Leonato's house.
I learned in this letter that Don Pedro of Aragon comes this night. That's not.
Messina. Oh, he is very nearby this. He was not 3 leagues off when I left him.
How many gentlemen have you lost in this action?
All right, so there's a report. Soldiers are coming back to Messina, and they want to know how many people have died in the battle that they just had. Okay. A few of any sort and none of name. So meaning nobody of any real name, like as in terms of like a noble person, and nobody who really counts. Nobody died who really counts.
Victory is twice itself when the achiever brings home full numbers. I find it here that Don Pedro has bestowed much honor on a young Florentine called Claudio.
All right, so our first mention of Claudio is that he has stood out in the war as being kind of a war hero. Okay, Don Pedro, he's the prince, he's the guy in charge on the battlefield, and apparently he has signaled or taken notice of Claudio and how great he's been doing in battle. Much deserved on his part and equally remembered by Don Pedro. He hath borne himself beyond the promise of his age, doing in the figure of a lamb the feats of a lion, meaning he's still a young guy. He looks like a lamb, but he's acting like a lion. He hath indeed bettered expectation than you must expect of me to tell you how.
He hath an uncle here in Messina will be very much glad of it.
I have already delivered him letters, and there appears much joy in him, even so much that joy could not show itself modest enough without a badge of bitterness.
Did he break out into tears?
In great measure.
A kind of overflow of kindness. There are no faces truer than those that are so washed. How much better is it to weep at joy than to joy at weeping?
All right, so Leonato kind of getting philosophical. It's better to cry tears of joy than it is to cry happy tears when somebody is sad. Seems like maybe a little foreshadowing might be happening there, but they're acknowledging that Claudio's done well, that his uncle is overwhelmed and crying tears of joy to hear how great he's been doing. All right, now we hear from Beatrice, Sassy Pants.
I pray you, is Senor Montanto returned from the wars or no?
All right, now Montanto, pretty much everything that comes out of Beatrice's mouth is some kind of sexual reference, right? To mount some, she's basically saying he's Sir Mounting, as in like sexual act mounting, right? So messenger, I know none of that name, lady. There was none of such in the army of any sort.
Why is he that you asked for me?
My cousin meets Sigmar Benedict of
Padua. Padua. It's the name of the
Padua.
town. Yep. Oh, he's returned and as pleasant as ever he was.
He set up his boast here in Messina and challenged Cupid at the fight. And my uncle's fool, reading the challenge, subscribed for Cupid and challenged him at the burgle. I pray you, how many hath he killed and eaten in these wars? And how many hath he killed? For indeed I promised to eat all of his killing.
All right, so we don't know really the history between Beatrice and Benedict, but if she promised that she would eat anything that Benedict killed in the war, she is either a cannibal or she has zero faith that he's going to actually be heroic and kill anybody in the war, right? So she's basically smack talking about Benedict. So how many people did he kill? I said I'd kill anybody that, all right, anybody he kills.
Faith niece, you tax Signor Benedict too much, but he'll meet with you, I doubt it not.
He has done good service, lady, in these wars.
You had must be
Victual.
victual, and he hath hope to eat it. He is a very valiant trencherman. He hath an excellent stomach.
And a good soldier too, lady.
And a good soldier to a lady, but what is he to a lord?
A lord to a lord, a man to a man, stuffed with all honorable virtues.
It is so indeed, he is no less than stuffed man, but for the stuffing, well, we are all mortal.
All right, so he uses the word stuffed, meaning he's filled with all kinds of good virtues. She sinks to the lowest level and says, yeah, he's a stuffed man, as in he stuffs his pants to make it look like he's a bigger man than he is. Right? Everything that Beatrice says drops to that level. You know?
You must not, sir, mistake my niece. There is a kind of merry war betwixt Signor Benedict and her. They never meet, but there's a skirmish of wit.
Alas, he gets nothing by that. In our last conflict, 4 of his 5 wits went halting off, and now is the whole man covered with one, so that if he have wit enough to keep himself warm, let him bear it for a difference between himself and his horse, for it is all the wealth that he hath left, to be no reasonable creature. Who is his companion now? He hath every month a new sworn brother.
All right, so she's making fun of him for stuffing his pants. Now she's making fun of him for being kind of an unfaithful friend. Every month he's got a new sworn brother, meaning he doesn't really have faithful friends that stick around for any length of time. He's constantly switching it up. Is it possible?
Very easily possible. He wears his faith, but as the fashion of his hat, it ever changes with the next flock.
I see, lady, the gentleman is not in your books, meaning clearly you don't like him.
No, if he were, I would burn my study. But I pray you, who is his companion? Is there no young squarer,
Swearer.
square, now that will make a voyage with him to the devil?
He is most in the company of the right noble Claudio.
O Lord, he will hang upon him like a disease. He is sooner caught than the pestilence, and the taker rose presently mad. God help the noble Claudio. If he had caught the Benedict, it will cost him £1,000 year a week here.
Right, so Claudio, we know, is the war hero that Don Pedro has basically, said he's the man. He's done well on the battlefield. Now we find out also that Claudio is hanging out with Benedict. And she says that's terrible for Claudio. Hanging out with Benedict is like catching a disease called Benedict. Okay, so seems like Beatrice is not really a big fan of Benedict. I will hold friends with you, lady.
Do good, friend. Oh, do good, friend.
You will never run mad, niece.
All right, meaning you'll never fall in love, because she's so sassy, there's no way she's ever gonna fall victim to falling in love.
No, not till a hot January.
Don Pedro is approached, and this is like in the movie where I would have to remind me, because I'm really bad about getting the forwarding part, but there's a big shower scene where they're all getting ready. The guys are coming back from war, the women are excited that they're coming, and so everybody's getting cleaned up, and there's some naked butts, so I will try to fast forward through that part. I know how good my fast forwarding skills are. I'll do my best. All right, Don Pedro, they've arrived. So Don Pedro. Don Pedro. You need a Don Pedro. This is Denzel in the movie, by the way. Good part. Anybody? Come on, gentlemen. Time to step up. I'm really just gonna pick on somebody. All right, Max, sounds like you're up. You there?
Good signor, family wishes trouble, passing the roads with good thoughts.
Never came trouble to my house in the likeness of your grace, for trouble being gone. Comfort should remain, but when you depart from me, sorrow abides, happiness ceases.
All right, so he's being a good host. Like, there's no problem. I'm happy to have you here. I'm gonna be sad when you leave, right? Okay,
Who is in charge to,
Her mother have many times told me so.
just kind of a low joke, right? Yes, it's my daughter. Her mother tells me that she's my daughter, right? Oh, we have a Benedict.
Yeah. Were you in doubt, sir, that you'd ask her?
Senior Benedict, no, that for then were you a child?
you have the full name. That's not the student's person. Who the lady father takes up. You have to.
Signor Leonato, be her father, she would not have his head on her shoulders for all who see her, as like him as she is.
I wonder that you will still be talking, Senior Benedict, when nobody marks you.
All right, so it's a pretty low insult. Oh, are you still talking? Nobody's listening to you. That's the first thing that she says to Benedict when he returns from war.
What, my dear Lady Disdain, are you yet living?
Is it possible Disdain should die while she hath such sweet food to feed it as Senior Benedict? Courtesy itself must convert to Disdain if you come in her presence.
Then is courtesy a turncoat. But it is certain I am loved of all ladies, only you excepted. And I could find in my heart that I had not a hard heart, for truly I love them.
All right, so he's apparently, all of the ladies are in love with Benedict, but it's so sad that Beatrice is the only one who doesn't love him. And it's so sad that he just hasn't found one and he doesn't love any back.
A dear happiness to women, they would else have been troubled with the
Pernicious.
pernicious suitor. I thank God in my cold blood I am of your humor for that. I had rather hear my dog bark at a crow than a man swear he loves me.
All right, so both of them pretty much saying, I'm not looking for love, right? She says, I'd rather hear a dog bark at the moon than a man say that he loves me or bark at a crow. All right, Benedict.
God, keep your ladyship still in that mind, so some gentleman or other shall escape a predestinate scratched face.
Scratching could not make it worse, and for such a face as yours were.
Well, you are a rare parrot teacher.
A bird of my tongue is better than a beast of yours.
I
would means I wish.
would my horse had the speed of your tongue, and so good a continuer. But keep your way, God's name, I have done.
You always end with the jade strict, I know you of old.
Then some will bring out to us for Claudia, it's no benefit. As long as we shall stay here at least a month, barely person page to make things. There's where you know,
Okay, so a couple things happening. Benedict shoots her down, right? Says, keep your way, in God's name, I'm done with this conversation. She reveals a little bit of history here when she says, you always end with a jade strip, which is a cheap shot. I know you of old. I know you of old could mean I know you, as in we've been together, or just I know your behavior. There's definitely a history between these two that did not end well. And so she's hinting at that there. The next part with Don Pedro, they have been invited, all of these men who just came back from war, have been invited to stay at Leonato's house for an entire month. So big news for the ladies who've been waiting for the guys to come back. Leonato?
If you swear, my lord, you shall not be forsworn. Let me bid you welcome, my lord, being reconciled to the prince, your brother. I owe you all duty.
All right, so again, we've got some character developments just starting to unravel here or unfold. We've got Don Pedro, who is the prince. He's played by Denzel, okay? And then he's got a half brother, Don John, right? And that's who Leonato is talking to here. He says, let me bid you welcome, my lord, being reconciled to the prince, your brother. I owe you all duty. If you're reconciled, it means you were recently in a fight, right? If you reconcile, you make up. So Don John, who's played by Keanu Reeves, by the way, So he's often referred to as the bastard brother because Don Pedro is the official prince. Don John's the bastard brother, meaning he's got king for a dad, but different mother, right? And so there's been some bad blood between Don Pedro and Don John recently, and they've only recently made up. Don Pedro is the one with power because he's the official prince. Okay, so it's really all up to him whether he's going to forgive Don John, let him back into good graces, into good society, good company. So Leonardo, the first thing he says to Don John is, "You're welcome here, right? Because you've recently reconciled with your brother. I owe you all duty, meaning you are included as well, because Don Pedro has forgiven him." Right? Do we have a Don John? Jimmy's feeling like Don John today. Your best Keanu.
I thank you. I am not of many words, but I thank you.
Is it your grace, Leon?
All right, exeunt means more than one person is exiting. Menant means more than one person is staying. So Benedict and Claudio are going to stick around and have a private conversation. We know that these two are good buddies, right? Because apparently Benedict's like a disease hanging on Claudio. All right, Claudio.
Benedict, didst thou note the daughter of Signor Leonardo?
I noted her not, but I looked on her.
Is she not a modest young lady?
Do you question me as an honest man should do? For my simple true judgment, or would you have me speak after my custom as being a professed tyrant to their sex?
No, I pray thee speak in sober judgment.
Why I think, methinks she's too low for a high praise, too brown for a fair praise, and too little for a great praise. Only this commendation I can afford her, that were she other than she is, she were unhandsome, and being no other but as she is, I do not like her.
All right, so it's not exactly a glowing recommendation that Benedict said. She's too short. She's too brown. I guess if she were anything other than she were, she'd be ugly, unhandsome. But being no other than she is, I don't even like her. So Benedict is not exactly singing the praises of Hero. Hero, on the other hand, has not said a single thing. And Claudio is like, "Oh, did you notice her? She's so modest." We don't know. She might be totally conceited. We don't know anything about her because she hasn't said anything yet. But Claudio is totally into her based on what she looks like.
This kind of sport, I pray thee tell me truly how thou likest her.
Would you buy her, that you inquire after her?
Can the world buy such a jewel?
Yeah, in a case to put it into. But speak you this with a sad brow, or do you play the flouting jack? To tell us Cupid is a good hair finder, and Vulcan a rare carpenter? Come, in what key shall a man take you go in the song?
In mine eyes, she is the sweetest lady that ever I looked on.
I can see yet without spectacles, and I see no such matter. There's her cousin, and she were not possessed with the fury. Exceeds her as much in beauty as the 1st of May doth the last of December. But I hope you have no intent to turn husband, have you?
All right, so a kind of an interesting little clue that he drops there. He's like, check her out next to her cousin. Well, her cousin is Beatrice, right? You look at the two of them, he's like, she's more beautiful than Hero, as much as May is more beautiful than December, when everything's dead, right? But Beatrice is possessed with a fury, a demon, so can't consider her seriously. But Benedict is at least acknowledging, apparently Beatrice is pretty good looking, even though she's filled with a demon. All right, Claudio?
I would scarce trust myself, though I had sworn the contrary, if Hero would be my wife.
It's come to this. In faith hath not the world one man, but he will wear his cap with suspicion. Shall I never see a bachelor of Greece store again? Go to thy faith, and thou wilt needs trust thy neck into a yoke, wear the print of it, and sigh away Sundays. Look, Don Pedro is returned to seek you.
All right, any idea why Benedict might be not supporting this love match between Claudio and Hero? Yeah.
Well, it's similar to Othello then maybe because he likes her.
Oh, could be, right? But I think he gives us a little bit more of a clue in here. He says, "Shall I never see a bachelor of 80 again? All the men are getting married. Thou wilt thrust thy neck into a yoke." You know those wooden things that they put the ox in, the head, right? So they can steer it around. That's Benedict's idea of marriage. You stick your head into that yoke and the woman steers you around and calls all the shots. So no more playing Xbox in the basement, no more hanging out watching the UFC fights on Saturday night. Like, he's getting stuck now with a woman. And Benedict's losing his best friend if Claudio falls into marriage trap. All right, here comes Don Pedro.
The secret that tells you to follow God's perfect.
I would your grace would constrain me to tell.
At first, you know, by
You hear, Count Claudio, I can be secret as a dumb man. I would have you think so. But on my allegiance, mark you this, on my allegiance, he is in love. With who? Now that is your grace's part. Mark how short his answer is. With Hero Leonato's short daughter.
Another dig at Hero apparently not being tall enough.
This were so were it uttered.
Like the old tale, my lord. It is not so, nor 'twas not so, but indeed, God forbid, it should be so.
My passion changed not shortly, God forbid it should be otherwise.
Amen. To lover, the Lord is very well with.
You speak this to fetch me in, my lord.
From my thought, speak my thought.
And in faith, my lord, I spoke mine.
By true faith and trust, my lord, I spoke mine.
That I love her, I feel.
She is worthy, I know.
That I neither feel how she should be loved, not know how she should be worthy, is the opinion that fire cannot melt out of me. I will die in it at the stake.
But I want ever not to reject the
Never could maintain his part, but in the point of his will.
That a woman conceived me, I thank her. That she brought me up, I likewise give her most humble thanks. But that I will have a rechape, bind it in my forehead, or hang on my bugle in an invisible baldric, all women shall pardon, because I will not do them the wrong to mistrust any. I will do myself the right to trust none, and the fine is, for the which I may go the finer, I will live a bachelor.
shall see you, where I die, fail with me.
With anger, with sickness, or hunger, my lord, not with love. Prove that ever I lose more blood with love than I'll ever get again with drinking. Pick out mine eyes with a ballad maker's pen, and hang me up at the door of a brothel house for the sign of blind Cupid.
All right, so Benedict clearly saying he's not going to ever fall in love. Don Pedro makes a prediction, yes, before I die, I'm gonna see you ill with love. Ben is like, no way, right? Pick out my eyes with a ballad maker's pens, people who are writing sappy love songs. Go ahead and pick my eyes out with that pen before I'll ever fall in love. Don Pedro? Well, if ever? Well, if ever?
Whatever thou hast thought mistake, I will put on it.
If I do, hang me in a bottle like a cat, and shoot at me. And he that hits me, let him be clapped on the shoulder and called Adam.
This time shall try. Time, seven,
Right, so everybody eventually wears the yoke, according to Don Pedro. You might say that you never want to get married, but eventually you're gonna willingly stick your head into that wooden yoke and let a woman lead you around.
The savage fool may, but if ever the sensible Benedict bear it, pluck off the bull's horns and set them in my forehead. Let me be loudly painted and in such great letters as they write, here is a good horse to hire. Let them signify under my sign. Here you may see Benedict the married man.
This should ever happen, I would be born mad.
Nay, if you could have not spent all days here in Venice, I will take the show.
All right, the quiver, that's the arrows, right? So Don Pedro says if Cupid hasn't used up all of his arrows already, pretty soon you are also going to be quivering with love because Cupid's gonna get you eventually.
I look for an earthquake to sue them.
Well, you temporize the animals. Meantime, good to know that they prepare and not. So no, not arrows myself. But you have a great revolution.
I have almost matter enough in me for such an ambassage, and so I commit you.
Claudio,
My liege, your highness,
to the tuition of God.
the tuition of God for my house if I had it.
Assistant to your life. You love your breath and everything.
Nay, mock not, the body of your discourse is sometimes guarded with brightness, and the guards are but slightly fastened on neither. Ere you, is that it? Flout old ends any further, examine your conscience.
Conscience.
Oh, conscience. And so I leave you.
My liege, your highness, now may do me good.
I love this. I teach it like out, down, shall see your actions. Be heartless and amazing.
Hath Leonardo have any son, my lord?
So child, the hero is the only heir. Thus now, effective.
Oh, my lord, if you went onward on this splendid action, I looked upon her with a soldier's eye. That light but had the rougher task in hand, but to drive liking to the name of love. Now I return that work months, when their place is vacant and moved. Come arming soft delicate desires, all prompting me now, prompting me how fair young girl is, and saying I like your hair, I went towards.
All right, so apparently this isn't the first time Claudio laid eyes on Hero. That he did see her before he went to war, right? But now that he came home and that war thoughts have left their places vacant, he's got some space in his head for thinking about girls now because you gotta focus on war before you go to war. But now that he's coming home, the war is done, he's got a little room in his brain to be thinking about Hero. And so now he is totally into Hero. Don Pedro?
I won't be the blunt because I'm tired of God us run their church. I will break with her. That's right. It's not stand without.
All right, break with her doesn't mean break up with her, it means get permission. So he's gonna bring up the topic with her father. So Don Pedro is gonna basically be the wingman here to go and set him up, get permission from the father, set this whole thing up for Claudio to be with Hero.
Ultimately, you do the spiritual law, that no love free by his country. But let's not our king, when you said this. And we have solid if the wants to trust. Judas. We need to bridge my brother and flood.
Right, we don't need more time. You don't need a bridge bigger than the flood. You just need one big enough to get over the flood. So we don't need more time for this to happen. We can take care of it right now.
There's granted is necessity. The people service with once that loveless, I will be forever. I know we shall have.
Reveling, that means partying.
I will do that part in this time. And then after the life of the
Okay, so they've got a plan. There's gonna be a party tonight. There's gonna be reveling. Significantly, it's going to be a masquerade so that the men are gonna be in disguise. And so Don Pedro sets up a deal where he says, I will tell fair Hero I am Claudio. I'll win her over. I'll get permission from her dad, and then I'll hand her over to you. Now, why Claudio can't just do it himself, I don't know. It's very middle school, right? But Don Pedro is gonna make all the moves for Hero while he's wearing his mask. they pretend to be Claudio, and then when she's all into Claudio, gets permission from the dad to marry her, and then done deal. Nothing could possibly go wrong with that plan, right? All right, let's stop there and wiggle until 36.